Yes, mine says it as well. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7:30. Let me call the meeting of the November 18th, 2014 session of the Merrimack Planning Board to order. Let me remind everyone who has an opportunity to testify before the board today to make sure you sign in and make sure the microphones are turned on with a bright green light in front of you so you can speak clearly into it and the folks at home can hear you. Our next meeting will be a joint meeting between the Planning Board and the Zoning Board here in this room on December 2nd at 7:30 p.m. The next Bike and Pedestrian Subcommittee meeting will be December 9th at 7:30 p.m. in the Memorial Room. Let me designate Nelson to sit in and vote tonight in Stan's place. And with that, brings us to our Planning and Zoning Administrator's report. Tim, do you have anything to offer for us tonight?
The only thing is to ask if the board has anything in particular topic-wise that you'd like to have staff prepare for the joint meeting on the 2nd.
Okay. I know there's been some discussion about the accessory dwelling units. Yep. Is there any others that the board would like to consider or address or have a discussion about with the zoning board when we have a joint meeting?
Yeah, I'll be absent that evening. I'm still out of town. Yeah.
Understood.
After all that trouble to get the drainage, and you're not going to be here.
You know, we're going to have the soil
You didn't
scientist.
consult me when you made the appointment.
Tim, how do we arrange when we? This room isn't really built for two boards to sit and meet at one time facing each other. How are we going to work that out?
If need be, we'll do similar to what the council and school board did. We'll set up another table out here so that there's room for everybody to sit. And
Okay.
we'll find slots for staff to sit because I anticipate probably all three of us will be here that night.
Okay. If any of the members of the board have anything that occurs to them after the meeting that would be a topic of discussion, please forward it to Tim and assemble it into a discussion agenda for us. I think accessory dwelling units and the soil scientist folks that Pete helped us set up, and Alistair went through the effort of setting up twice.
The only other topic that I've added to the agenda that I wanted to raise, it's more of a planning board issue than a zoning board issue, so I've actually placed it after the joint meeting portion of the night, would be to discuss regional impact determinations and how the board can set up a consistent process for doing that, because right now we're sort of ignoring that requirement of the state law.
Okay. I know that when we talk about, for years we've been talking about performance-based zoning and all of that, but that's not necessarily a discussion that
Not
can
necessarily.
be
I think we
limited
need to have the zoning board particularly involved with. I think we'll hopefully have some discussion points to come out of the zoning board meeting tomorrow night. Jillian will be asking the same question of them. I had asked them at their meeting in October to prepare what topics they had outside of the accessory dwelling unit issue that they'd like to discuss. I'm hoping that they're going to come back with the issues that they're seeing repeatedly happening with the zoning board, so that those are some of the things we can try to address in an amendment process rather than having them have to deal with variances on a regular basis.
Understood. Okay. Any other questions for the staff on the Planning and Zoning Administrator's report on this topic or any other? Seeing none. Brings us to item 3 on our agenda, which is Tomasian Drive LLC as the applicant and the Stephanie Tomasian Revocable Trust as the owner. It is agendaed as a review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for an application for a 19-lot cluster subdivision located at Tomasian Drive in the R1 residential, Aquifer Conservation and Flood Hazard Conservation Districts, and Shoreland Protection Area, Tax Map 4B, Lot 9-1. The item is continued from the September 23rd, 2014 planning meeting, and I have a note that the applicant is requesting that it be continued again to the December 16th, 2014 planning board meeting, and the reason for the request to reschedule is that their engineer, Ken, is overbooked. He's several other meetings tonight. So,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we continue this matter till December the 16th, 2014 at 7:30 p.m. in the Matthew Thornton room, and there will be no further notification to anybody.
is there a second for that motion?
I second that.
Second by Ms. Fault. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 5-0-0 to continue that item. Brings us to item 4 on the agenda, which is the John J. Flatley Company as the applicant and owner, and it's a review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of an application for a conditional use permit to permit a future mixed-use development consisting of industrial, multifamily residential, commercial, restaurant, and retail uses. The parcels are located at 645, 673, 685, 703, and 707 DW Highway in the I-1 Industrial Aquifer Conservation and Wellhead Protection Districts, Tax Map 6E, Lot 31, 33, 34, 35, and 36. The items continued from the July 22nd, 2014, August 5th, 2014, September 9th and 23rd, 2014, and October 7th, 2014 Planning Board meetings. And I also note that we've had a site walk in the interim with the minutes of that site walk on our agenda for later tonight to consider and approve. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicants?
Just to update the board on what has happened since the last meeting. Staff has had an opportunity to sit down with Kevin and Chad to discuss the project, where we're at, particularly in relation to the traffic analysis. As you recall, there were several comments made by CLD in the review of that traffic analysis. Through the information that's been gone back and forth since then with the chairman, members of the board that were at the site walk, and the applicant, we've come up with a strategy that there's an addendum to the an addendum memo in your packet tonight regarding traffic from the applicant's traffic consultant, and the bulk of the comments from CLD are more readily addressed during the specific site plan process for each individual project. So the responsibility of the applicant tonight would be to show that they've done enough the traffic analysis to show that they've met the criteria from the ordinance. Staff believes that they have done so, and tonight's discussion probably will likely focus primarily on some of the minor site changes that were made following the site walk and discussion of the phasing.
Thanks, Tim. Before we get into the presentation from the applicant, in terms of room setup, my understanding has always been that over there is better for the cameras at home, and it also doesn't block the microphone for the person who might come speak. I'm sorry to make you do that again. No, it's okay. It's obviously a 50-50 choice to go one way or another. And all the good folks that are sitting over on that side now get to look at the back of your board because of it. So with that, thank you for coming. Please introduce yourself and sign in and tell us where we're at with the project.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Chad Brandon.
Touch your microphone. You're not on. There you go.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Chad Brandon. I'm a civil engineer with Fieldstone Land Consultants. With me this evening is Kevin Walker with the John J. Flatley Company. We were last before you on October 7th, and at that time we had scheduled the site walk for the 25th. I unfortunately was not able to attend the site walk, but I understand that the walk went rather well, and there was one general comment that came from the site walk, and it pertained to the building in the far corner of the property and trying to increase the buffering to the adjacent residential area. We were presently proposing that buffer to be approximately 85 feet, which met the buffering requirements. What we did is we made some modifications to the plan and basically took the first stall of parking in front of the building, and were able to shift it to the back and then move the building forward about 60 feet. We did submit plans and exhibits that represented those revisions, and what that allowed us to do is increase the buffering to the adjacent area to approximately 150 feet, which I think was a number that may have been discussed in the field during the site walk. That really is the only change that we've made to the plan since the last meeting. I think all the other items were discussed in detail, but we'd certainly be happy to answer any questions if there's additional questions that the board may have. Since the last meeting, we did get a traffic memo and submitted a traffic memo. We've also met with the Department of Transportation and What we have requested in the memo, which was prepared by Vanessa Associates, and there was also a letter that was submitted with it from the John J. Flatley Company. What we've requested is that we collect the comments from CLD, as well as we're currently waiting to have a scoping meeting with the Department of Transportation. We collect the comments from CLD as well as the input that we receive from DOT, and we do one collective study and analysis and address all of the concerns at one time during the definitive process. The memo that we submitted, or that was submitted from Vanessa, does state pretty clearly in there that it's their professional opinion that the proposed mixed-use development will not create undue hazard or nuisance for vehicular or pedestrian traffic, and it acknowledges that there's certainly going to be some form of off-site improvements required for the project. So we're hoping that this memo, as well as the letter from the owner, will satisfy the requirements of the conditional use and will allow us to move forward and ultimately proceed with the traffic report for the definitive submission.
Just also, that meeting is scheduled for next week, yeah, next Tuesday. We'll be meeting with the DOT, get their scoping requirements, and we'll start moving forward from that point.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us as you introduce the project, or you ready for some questions and answers? Or?
Yes, we're ready for the questions and answers. I did, we did receive the recommendations from the planning department. I did speak with Jillian. I had a couple of questions on it, which were all made sense to me. So I'm prepared to answer questions or move forward.
Thank you, Kevin. Let me begin by saying I think you guys have done a lot of work on this plan, and thank you for having us out to the site to have a walk around it. I know that you walked around the woods with us, and it was very helpful to get a visual of how things were laid out there. I think you got a really great site. And I made sure that we walked around to the corners of where all these buildings were going to lay so we could see how close they were to the neighbors and all of that. And I appreciate the modification to shift the parking a little bit, designate them to be future spaces that may not get built if they're not needed, but if they are needed, at least parking is not something is as close to the neighbor's building as a big tall building would be. So thank you for that that adjustment. I think that 148 or 150 feet is a big difference from 80 feet or so for them. I know that the board has some interest, and you probably saw it in the staff memo, to discuss how you plan to phase the project and to put a little bit finer point on it with respect to the conditional use permit process. The underlying principle of the conditional use permit is that it's a mixed use development, and so we've recently had a similar application in the south end of town and pressed the applicant pretty hard to make sure that they had mixed use in every phase of their project. And I think that the board would be inclined to look at your project and ask for the same thing, that there be mixed uses in the phases. And I know the preference is to do the residential first, but talk to us a little bit about phasing and what you plan for that.
Well, as I mentioned a few times about our Nashua project, the game plan down there, which we'd like to do up here, is to establish the residential units on the site to help draw in the businesses. That worked great in Nashua. We filled up the first phase with 180 units, which was 5 buildings at that time. And soon thereafter, businesses were knocking on the door to come into the Terra Commons area. And I made leasing those areas a lot easier. It was an easier draw for the folks to come in. The businesses didn't have as much concern as to how many people are going to be showing up at their businesses and whatnot. And it worked out really well. And the one thing with the Nashua site, and I've mentioned it before, is that site is predominantly bedrock. There's been enough blasting over there to blow up the earth, it seems like. That said, constructing the retail in this area is not going to be as costly as it was in Nashua. So both from a standpoint expense-wise and having people drawn into the site, basically overall everything works in the site to move this thing forward. And I think I had mentioned at one of the earlier hearings, at this point I can tell you we've got 2 people interested in some industrial area. I spoke with our leasing department earlier today, and right now they're only around 40% in on getting somebody to sign. It's been relatively early going, and I asked them if they would be able to, at least on a monthly or bi-monthly or 4 times a year basis, come into the board, or I could come into the board with some information on who we've contacted for retail opportunities or industrial opportunities, just to show and prove to the board that we're working on this. We're aggressively pursuing different businesses and whatnot to get the interest in getting the retail and the industrial going. There seems to be some relative interest in the industrial at this point, but as you know, all the retail is up front, and that's going to be the draw to this site overall. So I think that's something that we will be pursuing relatively heavily once this particular process is over. Our leasing department will be ready to get rolling on it. But like I said, with our Nashua development, it worked out really well to have people and the people there to tell the businesses, you've got X amount of units here with people in them looking for your services. And that, along with, the neighborhood to the south will obviously...
I mean, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying about having the chicken and the egg. Something's got to come in there first. But on the other side of the coin, these aren't the only people that live in town. There's lots of other people that are going to come and use these businesses.
Agreed.
And would make it attractive for people to come put up some of these businesses, hopefully. Is there any interest or anything specific about the restaurant site or the 100,000 square foot, 120,000 square foot warehouse that's been previously approved?
We've had 2 requests on warehouse space.
Okay.
One was just recently, one was, I don't know, maybe a month ago. Again, both of those are, 30%, 40% as far as the paperwork and dealings back and forth.
I think that when we considered the last conditional use proposal, we required that they have at least a reasonable beginning on some of the commercial when they get certificate of occupancies for the residential. Isn't that how we set that up, Tim?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it does give you a bit of a head start. Is that something that you guys could commit to with part of this?
Well, I think as far as the approved site plan that we have now, I mean, if it comes down to it, we're game to build it. We'd just like to have, for instance, right now we have 120,000 square feet approved. We've had a request for 130. We've had a request for 150. So there might be a slight modification, and there may not. And there's so much extra parking there that wasn't really required to be there that we may just be able to substitute one portion of impervious for another portion.
Well, in terms of the process, we've got a conditional use permit that we could consider and vote on tonight. And then following that, we'd have to do site plans for the residential, if that's what you want to come forward with first. Maybe site plans for something else. And then at some point after that review process, you get to where you can actually put a shovel in the ground and start doing some work. How long is your construction plan on the residential before you'd be looking to actually move people into those buildings?
It would be a building by building type process. The ones that are going up currently in Nashua are a month and a half, 2 months apart as far as completion and occupancy. So from one building, it's going to vary.
Okay. Well, when would the first one? How long for the first one to get open?
If we were to have site plan approval, say March or April, if I were to venture, I'm just venturing a guess.
You'd have the buildings done and complete by March or April of
No.
2015?
No, I'm saying site plan approval.
Yes, okay, site plan
March,
approval,
yeah.
March or April, okay.
Yeah,
And then how long does it take to actually build the building?
We're probably looking between the site work and everything, 9 months.
Okay, so more or less a little bit.
2016.
Yeah.
January,
So-
February 2016.
In essence, if we treated your proposal as we've done in the past, you'd be looking at needing to have some substantial beginning on commercial by that point, February of 2016, say.
That would be permitting process, not necessarily construction.
Correct.
Right.
So it's not like we're demanding that you go first with the commercial or something like that. And
I guess
if you've got some leads now, it would seem that there'd be at least something, some element of
I would hope
commercial
so.
that.
I would definitely hope so. My fear is, and maybe this is something we can discuss in the future if this happens to occur, which I hope it doesn't, is for some reason, a deal isn't made or people are driving the prices too low as far as the commercial or industrial. I mean, if the board is open to some sort of extenuating circumstance, and again, throughout this process, I'm still okay with submitting to the board, even if it's informally handed into the planning department, just so you know, this is who we've been in contact with, this is where we stand with X, Y, and Z, however many people for this site. Just so, we want to make sure that the board is comfortable and the board is aware that, we're not going to be sitting on our hands waiting to throw up apartments and not do anything else. The site is, it's too big. It's too big of an area to not pursue.
I think
everything we have out there.
you've made that point that you've got these Nashua developments that you've done and done similarly, and you've got good success with them, and that you hope to breed that success over here. I think from the board standpoint, all of the applicants that approach us sort of come on the same terms, and that is, if you have a conditional use permit, we have you build all the residential, and the wheels fall off the world for whatever reason. Who knows why? Everybody thought GT Solar was a skyrocketing company until Apple decided to change their mind, and it was a big shock and surprise. I'm not saying it's got anything to do with you guys, but
Right.
things happen. Things happen in the world. And if you were to, for whatever reason, abandon the project after building the residential, then you've got residential in an industrial zone with no underlying basis for the conditional use permit to exist. And that's the ultimate element that we, as a board, trying to make sure that we guard against. And it's nothing to reflect on the company or what the company's reputation is. All the best laid plans sometimes just don't work out. I mean, it
Right.
happens. So that's really what it's getting after. And I don't want to hog the conversation. If other members of the board want to weigh in on this and provide a different look at it, or either
Not
more,
on the
more
phasing,
friendly
Mr.
or
Chairman.
less.
I've got a few other technical interest questions, but you're doing a wonderful job. I don't need to stick to my own.
Does anyone else have thoughts on phasing or Nelson?
Well, yeah, I'd like to see them make some kind of commitment beyond their effort. And he's talked about effort here, and I believe him. I believe they are going to make the effort to do it. But I would like to see some kind of stop or some kind of phasing of the residential to key in with the beginning, with the building of the commercial. And I want them linked so that you can't leave us with, as Bob suggested, a big residential
Right.
development in an industrial zone with no commercial or no other support.
So you're talking like maybe get permission for occupancy on 2 or 3 buildings prior to.
Yeah,
something like that
something
type of
like
thing.
that, or even
Yeah,
build the first 3 buildings, let's say,
Yeah.
and see how it goes. That's what I would like to see.
I mean,
and a
honestly,
commitment from
I
them.
think I think we'd be happy with that. But I really honestly think once that first building goes up, and especially when the second building goes up, because they'll know the first building's full when the second one's going up, that people will really be drawn. I mean, the fact that the exit, the toll's gone at the south exit, there's not one at the northerly exit at this point. That's just going to increase the traffic through this area. We weren't overly nervous. I think this development will draw people in regardless.
Do you see the buildings being built from the back of the site towards the front, or from the front first and then back, as far as the residential buildings? I guess
I
it
would,
probably makes
I would
sense to go
probably
front
think the
first.
front, yeah, I would think it'd be the front towards the back,
Yeah.
because I think a couple things, I know, and this will happen through a site plan process, we had spoken with the water department as well as the fire department, and they had mentioned as part of this overall project is providing a loop, and part of that loop would be going Allen Road, the paper portion of the street there, the cul-de-sac area. That may be something they want done at this point. That's probably something we're gonna at least wanna stub off of that entrance road to provide some sort of connection, if not right now, in the future.
If we were talking about doing something with the residential where you get a couple of the buildings done and then you got to get some commercial in the ground to make it a mixed-use development, and in addition to that, the last of the residential buildings to be built is the one that's the closest to those abutters, I think that would something I'd look favorably at
Yeah,
as a compromise.
the one that we pushed.
Yeah, the one that we pushed
Yeah.
back, and although
Yeah.
I like it pushed back, it's still, if we were gonna do
Yep.
the residential buildings a piece at a time, mark that one as being the one to go last.
Yeah,
So that
I
if-
don't think that would be an issue, and that would work out construction-wise also. The parking, as you can see on the northerly of the right-hand side buildings, can be done completely separate from that. It's not a, you know.
Yeah.
it's
And
not
that way you've got the
it'll work.
least impact on the neighbor if, like I said, the world doesn't cooperate and the wheels fall off and the thing stops somewhere. It'll stop before that happens.
We don't expect it to. We
I don't
really
either.
don't at this point.
I think that you're going to be very successful. You've been very successful in other places. I trust that you're going to give it your best effort. But like I said, sometimes just stuff happens. So I fully expect that. Does anyone want to talk about something else besides
Yeah,
phasing?
could I ask a couple of questions? How much of this site work and infrastructure are you going to put in down this end? Given that we know you're going to concentrate up here, are you going to put the whole of this walkway in, or whatever way you like to call it, driveway? Are you going to put in the infrastructure for here, or are you not going to put it in?
Well, we're not going to put the infrastructure in for those other portions until we come in with a site plan. for-
Could you be specific? Are you going to put the infrastructure in for this lot?
We're,
When
Such
is the
as like
site plan
drainage,
for?
that type of thing?
Drainage services, in the widest use of the word services.
we would only be coming forward initially with a site development plan.
Yeah, you see,
review.
that's where I'm getting twitchy. Because, you see, I'm not saying it, I'm not trying to impute anything to you, but I would feel a lot happier if I knew that a bit more of it was being done so that the if you like, industrial, commercial, whatever bits could be seen to be sort of planned. If you're just going to do the residential, I'm left with nervous feelings, and I can't help it.
I anticipate the walkway being constructed down to here. Now, I haven't discussed this in exact terms with Mr. Flatley, but you know, we're aiming for this. You dying there? Huh? This pond area here to be an amenity to the site, not only for the people that are going to be shopping there, but also for the residents. And you can see that walkway loops around and comes right through to what we hope will be a sitting area down there. So at least this section of walkway. Now, if the first three buildings are built, we may stop it here and then come over and build it here, and people can kind of walk over and do it. But I could see this getting built right off the bat, which is quite a bit more than half of that entire walkway throughout the whole site.
Kevin, can you direct me into what you envision being separate site plans? Residential being one.
I think all of, I mean, the industrial building, if it goes here, would be a separate site plan. If it goes in here, then we've already got a site plan approval.
Was that a little bit of retail in the front of
Yes,
that one?
that
So
is-
that would
that
be
is there.
separate than the industrial
That would be
building?
separate. I would think we'd just do this whole thing as one, and maybe this whole thing as one.
And then the big store as one with its
Yeah,
restaurant?
which I think, I don't see that happening anytime soon, but
Times change. Who knows?
they do, yeah.
Okay. So we've got 1, 2,
think it's
3, 4,
four.
5, 6 potential site
And,
plans.
yeah, the restaurant would probably be
A separate
a
one,
separate site
7,
plan.
7 separate site
One,
plans.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have comments? Do you want to comment further on that?
No, I got half the answer I wanted.
Go for the other half if you want. Anybody else have comments or questions? Desiree?
I was just going to talk kind of in regards to the other CUP on the south end of town. That one, they had to phase it, and we approved it. We gave them leeway, and we said, if you build the gas station portion of it, along with your multifamily, then it's considered mixed use. And it's not exactly the ideal thing, but it was mixing, so it was looking for something that was easier, because that one was right off of the main entrance from there. It was something that they could do fairly easily, and it kind of helped satisfy it. So I'd encourage you to look at something like that you can do somewhere else. Like if you do, obviously it's all separated, but if you do your residential, your multifamily, and then one of the retails, or
And if we even get 3 retailers, it's gonna be enough to build at least one of these, maybe not the big one up front there, but the 3 down in this area, or this one on the north end, or one of the smaller ones in there. Again, not to keep beating Nashua to death, but they did have some leads on some retail and some medical actually in that particular area, and they had enough of interest to build it and start getting the leases signed, and hopefully that's the case here too.
yeah.
In these, you mentioned medical, and typically we look at medical and say that's a welcome use that we really like, but this
There's something right across the
this
street. I think.
CUP kind of a concept where it's master planned and has a bunch of shops, seems like you'd want shops that somebody would go wandering around,
Oh, definitely.
take
yeah.
a walk, and
Yeah.
walking past a dentist's office or a doctor's office doesn't really have any draw for anybody to come stroll and see what's going on there.
A candy shop and a sub shop and then doctor's office. Yeah.
And so
That's not in this plan. That's
Okay.
just what happens to be down in the Nashua site.
Additionally, Mr. Chairman, with what's going on at exit 11 with the convenient MD and St. Joe's, I don't think we're going to want much more medical office building in this town.
no
for
matter
that
what we
long.
want, applicants are going to want to come. There's always going to be healthcare growing. That's just the way that works.
Well, there's one right across the street from it too.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's
I mean,
like
the
St.
plan
Joseph's
is
right across.
the plan is all retail at this point. Retail,
Okay.
restaurant, that type of thing.
Understood. Go ahead,
Let's
Desiree.
say, just to finish up on mine, I think what it is we're driving at is that first phase being the multifamily and another component with it being called phase 1. I think that's really what we're kind of pushing towards for that. So
We
that's-
would just like to. It'd be nice just to put up a box and say, here's a box, and go from there. But it would be really good not only for the future users, but also for us. I mean, I'd hate to put up a shell of a building and guess at where the walls are going. That type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And while we didn't do that in the other site, we were moving walls around. How can we have this 2 feet wide or 2 feet bigger? And it'd be nice to. I mean, now there's a little more experience on how all that works. I think it would be nicer to get a user in with a size that they want. We can always throw a building up, but we don't want to just throw a building up. We want to make it useful for not only the people there, but obviously make it look good to the people on the outside. And that's-
I don't disagree with that. I don't want to put up something that doesn't fit just to say that you put a shovel in the ground. But at the Shaw's Plaza on the south side of town, and you got a row of a few stores, and the New Hampshire liquor stores were moved in there, and the restaurants moved in there, and all those kinds of tenants aren't really looking to shape what the building looks like. They just want some space that they can get in the next
Right.
couple of months.
Yeah.
And so having a couple of storefronts available for somebody to come in and choose from probably isn't the worst situation in the world.
Oh,
I mean,
no, definitely not. No.
a big retailer is going to look to shape what the building looks like because it's their trade dress, but it doesn't mean that you can't sort of maybe even do a little bit better with tenants by having a shovel in the ground and say, we're on our way, we've got the permits and all that. But let's talk about that a little bit more lately as we get along in our discussion tonight. I don't know if anybody's got other subjects, or maybe some of the folks that are here want to weigh in.
I just wanted to touch base again on the overall concept of tying it together. I mean, if you phase it in 7 different pieces, the question of, is this one unit, or, one planned, or conditional use, or is it really 7 different distinct pieces, and they're going to be different architecture and different thoughts and different everything else? And we still, because of that big retail space in the middle there that you keep hedging whether or not it's ever going to get built,
Yeah.
it still looks like it's totally disconnected, if you will. There's a residential piece somewhere down the road. There's a retail piece, and maybe an industrial piece somewhere, and it just that elephant, if you will, is just sitting there chewing up the biggest piece of the real estate. And I mean, if you could, if you didn't have that and you had some mixed use retail and commercial in there, that seems like it'd be an awesome way to integrate the residential into the entire program.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with what you're saying, and I mean, I don't know the whole leasing business like the leasing people do in our office, but I'm kind of with you. I think a big box there would I think something like the middle setup of smaller retail buildings in that area would fill that area and provide parking and all that good stuff. And there may come a point, at some point where he says, all right, well, I'm sick of this piece of land just sitting here. We'd probably have to come back. I don't know if we'd have to come, well, we'd have to come back in with something.
Yeah, whatever you build, there's got to have a
Something
site plan.
There'd be a site plan, yeah. It would still be retail with less square footage probably, so
Different
I
layout.
don't think that would, a little bit different layout, but.
Yeah, but from our point of view, the worrying thing is you might say, well, we ain't going to build that big box store, let's put some more apartments in there. And that's exactly what we're worried about.
Right, but I mean, our approval will be specific to the number of units, and I mean, this is, through your permitting process, you can basically tell us no.
Yeah, we certainly can, but if an applicant comes to us, and we have had an applicant on a different site come to us and say, I started this off with all intentions of making this particular building commercial, but the world won't cooperate with me, and I need to make it residential, and if you don't, it's going to be vacant, and I can't pay my taxes, and I can't, continue with what I'm doing business-wise. And when you've got something that's already got that big of a start on it, it's very difficult to tell an applicant, we're going to have to see you sit with an empty building waiting for the retail customers because we're not going to give you the relief you asked for. It's a very difficult thing to do.
Just so the board knows, there's no intention at all to have more apartments on the site. If you remember, we came in here with actually 6 48-unit buildings. There was 288 units when we first applied, and we decided, I think this maybe look a little better and might be a little more site friendly to back off 48 units, which obviously isn't a small number of units. So, a lot of thought goes into the site as well as the economics on it.
And I think that you have done with the layout of the walking paths and putting the berm between the residential and the retail, you've done some things to make them fit together. And I know we've talked before in committing to having common architecture and all of that. So I guess that would be both part of our approval and perhaps part of a development agreement that would have to come with this. But yeah, I get what Tom's saying.
And the final piece is just the overall connectivity, and it has to be more than just a walk path. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that would be in this residential area that would be willing to drive over to the retail and then go somewhere from there. There is a road that cuts behind that building, but I'd want to see that be a nice travelable road, not necessarily a delivery road or something like that, to allow them to get there without having to go out on DW Highway. I mean, my biggest fear is people are going to feel like the way to get over there is to go out and come back in again, and that's just going to create a traffic nightmare.
Well, we did add a vehicular connection.
I know, but you're not talking about building it right away, and so when it does get any activity, I would like to see that infrastructure put in and have it be a nice travelable road. And typically for me, going behind a big box store doesn't feel like a travelable way to go. I mean, usually
I feel like I'm where I ought to be.
You're expecting or delivery trucks and other stuff back there, along with pallets and every other darn thing that they hide behind their building. But
well, and I mean, we're trying to provide the connection, but not let people know about it. I mean, we don't want to attract the
Two-way
commercial
traffic.
business into the residential site. So it's located intentionally. The people of the complex will know that it's there and will be able to utilize it and not go out onto DW Highway. But certainly somebody that visits the property will not know that it's there, and therefore will not come into the residential end. I mean, in order to have a kind of an upscale community in a nice private setting, we don't want to advertise a lot of traffic and bring people in. It would take away from frankly the walkway that's back there in that area and all the common areas through there as well. I think if we provided something like that, it would take away from the pedestrian component of the project. So if you recall, initially we did not have that in there, and frankly the owner was pretty adamant about it not being in there, but we were able to find a way to position it where he was comfortable with it. And it is good for emergency access. And
Yes.
Certainly 2 means of access is a good thing. But it does have to.
It definitely does that for you. I guess the discussion that Tom started and you've responded to, Chad, raises 2 questions from my mind. One is, since we're not really sure what big box might go there or when, if you get to the point that you're putting the retail on the other end of the site down by St. Gobain, you got to build that roadway all the way across past where the big box is eventually going to be, so that it's there and it's usable. And if it takes 10 years for that big box site to get used, you've still got that connectivity and walkability and all of that. And so that point, I think, needs to be made in terms of when you would phase different pieces of infrastructure. The second comment that I want to add to that is I get what you're saying about not wanting to draw traffic into the residential that doesn't belong there, isn't associated with residential. I don't know that you're close to doing that, because I don't know why in the world anybody would want to go down that path to get the I mean, if they want to get the residential neighborhood just to see what's going on or visit somebody, they can turn off of DW Highway and come in anytime they want. If somebody really is interested in going to look around there for good reasons or bad reasons, they can come right in the front door. The back door isn't a shortcut to anywhere. It doesn't get them out of the parking lot faster, or it doesn't help them make a left turn or a right turn or any of that kind of stuff. And actually, that entrance at the big box is one of the ones where you're talking about signalized. So that's where people are going to go to get out of that parking lot. They're not going to go out the back door, because it doesn't lead them anywhere quicker than where they would go otherwise. Now, I don't know how much adjustments you make before it does start to look more appealing, but I think you got a little bit more room to tweak that if you have a desire to do that, if it's what the board wants to see you do, if that makes sense. Other members of the board have comments, or should we see what the public thinks?
Well, what you said just makes sense to me. I think that is an issue, and maybe we can address it at the time of site plan, individual site plans, and we may want to do something with it at that time. As you say, it could be 10 years before they built that other building. Meanwhile, you want to have people being able to access the retail,
The other retail
both
that's
pedestrian and vehicular. So I think
And
that's good.
that may be when, there's some thought put into, do you keep marketing it as a big box, or do you start looking at, bringing in those other retail elements? If the other portion of the site's been successful, then it would probably make sense to do that. I mean, obviously the big box sites are pretty, they're diminishing. So this is, from a leasing standpoint, I'm assuming this is coming from the leasing part of the business. They want to at least have an opportunity to try to market that area and to try to find a user. And
Under our current zoning, this is the only way you can do a big box in Merrimack.
So it's the only site, and I don't mind them having an opportunity to try to do it, but I think by anybody's definition, you've got a list of a dozen companies. I can only think of probably 6, but let's say there's a dozen or even 20 companies that do big box, and I don't think that there are. How long does it make to make 25 phone calls and say, find out from those guys whether there's some interest or not, or whether there would be some interest a little further down the road? At some point, after a couple of years, you will have tested that market. I mean, it doesn't take that long. It's not an infinite number. It's not like the small retail where basically there could be millions of companies that people would come forward with an idea to say, you know, everything from mailboxes to sandwiches could go in one of those storefronts.
Just speaking from what I know there was an interest on this property about 10 years ago for a big box. So maybe that interest is going to be back shortly with, you know, things picking up. But so there has been interest in the past, and I think that is probably why, you know, they want to at least, you know, get it through the
A lot of change in 10 years. There's been a lot of change
Right.
in
Yeah.
retailing. Yeah.
In the industry. But, you know, I'm not going to try and second guess the business minds that you guys have put to work on this. That's what you guys do for a living. I'm glad to have it. I'm glad to give you the flexibility to do what you want to do, but at some point, the CUP process has to have a common theme, common architecture, connected organization, connected site plans and different developments so that those things work together as a master planned site. And if this is the piece that we think is probably the furthest out on the horizon, there's got to be a thought process to how do we connect the things on the opposite sides of it to each other in the meantime, effectively, efficiently, workably for you guys and all of that. Other comments by members of the board?
A couple of general
Awesome.
comments about the CUP in general. Going through, just getting ready for tonight, we got a nice new plan that shows a portion of the site redesigned, and it brought to mind that somewhere we should have a package. As we're going to approve this, as I read through the minutes, there were lots of things said and committed here and there, and it's kind of scattered around, and there's no, like, CUP document that we can pick up and say, oh, this is what they're going to do there, you know? And it includes the things that they've agreed to. I'm not trying to add anything to the process, but it seems we'd ought to have a package with a site plan that's...
I would envision that the final product that would come to the board for signature would look very similar to the packet that Edgebrook had put together for theirs, which was...
Yeah, that's what I was
which had
thinking
tabs
of.
in it with all the different sections.
And referencing
And inserts
the-
for the plans themselves.
referencing
That's ultimately what I
existing
would envision having for a final package for the board.
Yeah, but, okay, I don't know if the applicant knows that, but...
Yeah, actually, I took,
Yeah.
I was, the planning department actually gave me the Edgebrook packet,
Yeah.
just so I could flip through
Yeah.
it and understand
Yeah.
what it was all about.
Okay, I think that's good for our records as time goes on and things
Yeah,
change.
everybody on the same page.
Everybody's
and
on the same
exactly
page,
right.
right, yeah. And that will refer to things like the architecture, which hasn't been, and this water loop, I gather you've now been with MVD,
Yeah.
and you got some idea of where they want the water loop,
Yes.
or maybe where you want it, and maybe they're the same, and maybe they're not, but,
No, we're on the same page.
All on the same
definitely.
page
Yeah,
there.
Yeah.
okay. One other thing that occurred to me before we opened for public was, we never talked about the land east of the railroad. Is that part of this, of your property?
No.
That belongs to the railroad, that
That is,
property?
that's the railroad land, and on the other side, there are portions, I think there's a couple privately owned and a couple of actually town-owned pieces
On the other side of the tracks?
on the opposite side of the railroad, yeah.
With no access,
No
Anywhere.
access, no legal access from our portion.
none?
No, because I remember we had spoken about that, I
Yeah.
think it was at our first meeting, was seeing if there was some access across to, maybe put a, picnic area or something like that
Yeah,
on
we
the
did
town
talk-
property.
Yep.
I just fear people crossing those tracks.
Well, yeah, you can't just cross the tracks. You've got, yeah, but I just didn't know where we left it. We mentioned it at one point in the
Right.
process, and it went away as we
Yeah,
got
I mean,
interested in other things.
we don't have to do it this minute, but if it's, we could try getting the okay from the railroad but I mean, I think if they have half a brain, they're gonna say no.
Well,
Of course they are.
No, you never know. You can be surprised by that. But I guess the concern that I have is not what the railroad would say, because we don't know what they say. You got to ask first.
Right.
But if, for example, on the lower left of your picture there, you see the land get a little bit wider across the railroad tracks, if that's the town-owned parcel, and I don't know what it is, and you say, I don't know, it's a few acres, and you'd put a picnic area there. Well, is that a picnic area for the benefit of people who live on your site, or is that one that I can come see because I live 3 miles from here, but I like the riverbank, and
Yeah.
we don't really have any good riverbank access where I can go picnic, so can I come to the back of your site, park somewhere, and go have a picnic? And if I can't, then what are we doing putting town-owned property back there to be a picnic area or anything else?
We probably got it for taxes or something.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
nevertheless, I really do, separate from your process, nothing to do with your project, I wish the town made better use of its riverfront access and did something attractive and good for the community, whether it's places to shop or places to eat that looked out over the river or places to walk and exercise, whatever it be. It's almost like we don't even know the river's there most of the time from around town. And I think that more could be done with it.
But I guess just one point, it's very important, but we are going to provide an access off of the back end of the apartments for the fire department. We had spoken with the fire department on more than just a couple occasions. They said they run into some issues with brush fires along the rail line, and that they have a tough time getting access in different spots. So we are going to provide there's a gravel road that goes down to the tracks, and that's an actual drivable area. So we're going to pave off the end of one of the back end parking areas to basically meld into the gravel road so they can
Okay,
have access back there.
sounds good. Well, the people that are there riding their motorcycles all over your site today will be pleased to have that connectivity so they can keep getting around for a while longer.
Yeah, it was a Wednesday, and there was like a 14-year-old out there riding. It's like, you're supposed to be at school.
Well, they're out there.
They're out there.
Other comments from the board?
That's all I have.
If none, let's open it up for public comment if there are any citizens or abutters who wish to weigh in. Kevin and Chad, could you allow the table to be used if anyone wants to come in forward? And I don't know if anybody does. Nobody's rushing forward so far. Okay, well, you do have some folks coming forward. So come forward to the table. Please sign in and tell us your name and what you have on your mind for us.
My name is Gene Porter. I live at 77 Concord Street in Nashua. I am not an abutter on this project. And I'd like to thank the chairman for setting up my comments. I'm the chairman of the Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee, and we are particularly interested in projects along the Lower Merrimack within a quarter mile of the river. And there are special legal provisions for municipalities to bring these to our attention, and so I'm glad to be able to be here tonight and at least offer some preliminary comments and maybe questions for the developer on very much along the lines of what Mr. Best brought up. There are sort of three things that are really different about this near water development from the great development in Nashua. One is a lot more attention to drainage. And so as site plans come forward and DES gets permit applications, we will be looking seriously at drainage provisions to keep as much stuff as possible out of the river. Local infiltrations, local treatment, if necessary, permeable parking lots, those sorts of issues. Drainage is a big deal for projects within a quarter mile of the river. Another provision that we will look at, and I hope the developers have looked at, is the visibility of their project from the river. Now this is pretty far up towards the highway. We had previously looked at the development, the FW Webb development plans between Saint-Gobain and the river, and the general rule is you shouldn't be able to see new buildings from the river. There should be enough natural vegetation between the river and new buildings that the new buildings are screened. I certainly haven't taken out a rule or protractors to look at your plans, but I just bring that to your attention if you haven't already looked at it. And the third, which the chairman brought up, was public access to the river. There's plans on the books for a New Hampshire Heritage Trail along the Merrimack River from Franconia Notch to the Massachusetts border. This goes right through there. It would be nice if there were, in fact, preferably on the river side of the tracks, provisions for Heritage Trail. Now, this is not the developer's property, but there could be some acquisition to provide public amenities on the river side of the tracks. And the idea of a patio or a promenade or a bar down by the river, or a place where people can go and walk and relax by the river would be very nice. Now, the idea of walking across live railroad tracks gets everybody exercised, and very properly so, but there are other solutions. At Reed's Ferry, there's a tunnel under the tracks that lets people with canoes and kayaks go down to the river. Very attractive spot, very nicely done. Could be done here, I would think. I haven't looked at it from an engineering point of view, but I would encourage the developer to add riverfront amenities to part of this project, because it's state policy and lots of plans on the books that are encouraging increased public access to the banks of the Merrimack River. And here is a big project that's got a lot of momentum behind it that could do more than I heard tonight on providing public access along the riverfront. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Will you stay for a few questions?
Sure.
Thank you for your explanation of drainage and screening of the buildings and the public access. I'm with you 100% on the drainage and the public access. The question I have is about screening, and I think you mentioned sort of not being able to see buildings from the river, and then a little bit later you talked more about the kinds of things I was talking about, like a promenade or a restaurant or a bar or patio seating.
That's sort of the public access side of things. Visual access, not just getting in the water, but visual access.
Sure, yes. But I guess that was a little conflict there, because if you put a restaurant up on the river, you're going to see it from the river, right?
Right.
So what is it that you're looking for in terms of the...
Somebody, you perhaps have to make that trade between visual impairment of new buildings that you see from the river and the attractiveness of a riverfront site. I don't think we have any predisposition to to argue against that. Maybe against a big new concrete block building that sticks up above the tree line, but I don't see that in anything I've seen.
So you don't want another sewer treatment plant up by the river from town? We got one of those sitting on it. Does anybody else have questions for Mr. Porter or comments? Thank you for coming in. I really do appreciate the comments that you've shared with us.
You can sign in.
Oh, yes, please do. I'm glad that you were able to come. I saw the exchange of a couple of emails about notice and timing and all of that, but I'm glad to have you here and glad to hear from you. I think as site plans come forward, there'll be sort of a official process to get you involved and engaged. Does anybody else, any other citizens or abutters wish to come forward and testify? Ma'am, come on forward.
They've got this chair for a 6-footer.
They can adjust it a little bit. Get a little lower if you want.
I
Got it. Take your time and get comfortable. Make sure you sign in. You're ready to go. I almost wish your property did go across the river so you could develop something nice there for us to go visit and see and have a sandwich and watch whatever you can see from the river. Yeah. Yeah, it'd make your place pretty valuable. Yeah.
I'm Sylvia Hunter, and a butter across the street from the Flatley property. I had 2 questions, and I had one comment. And I may have missed it, but has it been definitely defined as to where the stoplight is going to be?
It hasn't in terms of there being any approvals or DOT or even site plan approvals from us. However, the applicants indicated some expectation that they would use the stoplight that's at the St. Gobain entrance and the bowling alley and the Southern New Hampshire Hospital. And then they're considering or proposing the possibility of another stoplight access at the driveway entrance to what's the big box store right there, where he's pointing.
And is that adjacent where AV Septic is right now, or?
I don't know what's right across the street from there. I think that's
the pool place,
I
it's
think
between
it
the
was-
pool place and the depot.
Between the pool place and the depot, so that's just north of me, okay.
Yeah.
And also, would the road work definitely has to be done, I would assume, on DW Highway to address the needs, maybe a turning lane in the center or something like that. Would that work be done prior to the buildings being put in, or would it be done congruently with them, or at what time would that?
Any off-site improvements would have to be completed before they would be allowed to occupy any new building out there.
Okay, so the buildings could be built but not occupied during that time.
Sure. Now, what those off-site improvements are have not been determined because they got to come forward with site plans. And for example, the site that has the big box store on it, they could come forward and say, you know, this big box idea is just not going to work out for us. We want to do 43 units of small retail at 2,000 square foot apiece, and shows a completely different layout. And then decide that they want to do their driveway a different way. And in that case, maybe there wouldn't be the same kind of off-site improvement. Nelson?
I would envision that possibly the work on Route 3 would be phased along with the building and the phasing of different parts of this plan. So I didn't want to give a false impression, Tim. It won't all be done at once. It may not all be done at once. It might be done in smaller pieces, consistent with the amount of development that's going on this site.
And just to clarify what tonight and the conditional use permit process is about, the conditional use permit process that the board is considering tonight would allow the applicant to then move forward with individual site plans and subdivisions to do the individual components of the project. So any approval that the board grants to the conditional use permit does not authorize any construction of any kind to take place.
No.
Those would have to take place with a separate site plan application, separate public hearings and notification, and going through the normal site plan process for each individual component of the project.
And to the point of your interest, each one of those site plans would have a traffic study, which would determine what kind of cars they're going to put on the road. We would probably have a peer review looking at their traffic study to say we agree with it or we don't agree with it, or you've got it all wrong or you got it perfect. And then that traffic study would drive traffic lights, turning lanes, and all of that kind of decision making.
Could I assume that most of the, if you add additional lanes, the property would be taken from that side, the construction side, rather than the present residential side?
I can't give you the answer to that, but my understanding is that DW Highway already has right-of-ways that belong to the DOT through that section.
They have about, I don't know,
A gazillion
5
feet of it.
6 feet, or maybe might be a little bit more
Okay.
than that. Yeah, from the center line.
I think if they don't already have the right-of-ways that they need, I think that they would likely have to
That would be
acquire
something
from
that
the
they would go
developer.
through the permitting process with the DOT for their driveway permit. Those types of issues would have to be resolved at that process.
So the applicant would have to solve that problem. And
My comment was, maybe if this project goes in with the roads and everything, we won't see a lot of trucks going in there trying to pull out vehicles that got stuck in the mud in the spring. Three-wheelers and then ski-mobiles and stuff like that. I could sit there and I could count probably 10 to 12 vehicles on there frequently at one
People
time
using
when
it
the
recreationally.
weather's right. But,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
yes, and they're all trespassing, and I always pray that there's 9 and 10-year-olds out there with motorized vehicles that should not be out there, and I
They were
always
out there on the day that we
worry
walked
that-
the site.
walked the
and,
site
and
with
no
them,
one
yeah.
with them, you know, just the really
That's
young
right.
kids, and it's scary.
You know, it was kind of odd because they were out there when we were walking the site, and it was a little bit weird where for a second I thought they were going to come tell us to get off their property. And then I think they realized that they better not because they didn't, you know, they kind of came close and then they decided to go in their other direction.
But I don't think there's anyone that has, I mean, that's totally owned by Flatley, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not- That's what,
It
that's
is.
what I thought.
Ms. Hunter, can you point out where your home is?
How far up are you?
Lynn's got it.
Press the little button.
Nothing's happening. Oh, there it goes.
It is right here.
Yeah, okay.
So you're right next to the depot?
One of these,
That's Depot.
this is
Yeah.
Depot.
This is Depot,
Yeah,
and this
that's
is
you.
me,
That's it,
Okay.
right there. Oh, that's-
Thank you for pointing that out. I don't have any more items that I'd want to discuss with you, Ms. Hunter, but if you have any other comments or additions you'd like to offer for the board, any other members have questions or thoughts? Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you
in.
so much for entertaining our questions.
Glad to do it. Are there other citizens or butters who wish to weigh in? I don't see any hands. Going once, going twice. I'll close the public hearing. Please come back front. Are there other questions or comments from members of the board with respect to what the applicants discussed with us here tonight?
Could I just ask one question, and it's probably going to go in the development agreement, that there's no mention of the magic word of salt, but I can assume that you're not going to be using large amounts of sodium chloride, particularly in view of the gentleman from the water organisation.
No, a good amount of discussion was had prior to this discussion about how we're going to handle drainage and how we're going to maintain those access ways, and there's not going to be any salt. The wellhead protection area comes out quite a ways. It's almost takes up the whole St. Gobain building. So from
Yeah.
there to the south, there won't be any salt.
Okay.
And it will also contain. It's going to have all retention for drainage. Just to
Okay.
point that out.
We were at the site, I think you mentioned, and it seemed like when we were out there that the soils were very sandy and well drained, and I know that that's part of the same plane where the town's wells are, which is very sandy soil and all of that. But our board is going to have the opportunity in a couple of weeks to get a lesson in soil science from, who is it, Department of Agriculture?
NRCS.
Who's NRCS?
National.
Natural Resources Conservation.
Thank you. He says it better than I do.
So we will know a little bit more, and we'll be able to ask you better questions going forward about the soil and what you've got going on for drainage and all that. So we're going to learn up a little.
Just to touch on that, I know Mr. Porter wasn't here, but a couple meetings back, we did talk about some of the avenues that we were anticipating going with drainage, low-impact design, retention basins, maybe some porous asphalt in areas, mainly because the soils are so conducive for those practices. And he is correct. We will eventually be going before them as part of the permitting process as well, and sharing our project and our design intent. We're so preliminary at this stage. You know, we would have a design. It would be part of the site. Once we pull together the site plan and start applying for permits. So I certainly don't want him to think we were sidestepping him. We'll be interested in hearing their input, and hopefully our design will address a good number of their concerns once we have an opportunity to bring it to that point. And then I just wanted to touch on Ms. Hunter. I believe the reason she may have come up here is, again, a couple meetings back, she had a concern relative to the entrance of the property, and one of the revisions that we have made is we shifted the entrance, I believe approximately 150, if not more, feet, and lined it up with a commercial driveway across the road. So just to clarify for the record, we have made that modification to try to address a concern that she made at a meeting in the past. I think that may have been what she was referring to when she...
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Other thoughts or ideas you want to share with the board? The applicant has asked and the staff has recommended that the board consider granting conditional final approval to the conditional use permit here tonight. My impression is that I'd like to have a conversation with the board about phasing to figure out what we would require of the applicant, based on what the applicant shared with us. And other than that, I'm prepared to vote on the question of conditional final approval of the CUP, knowing that we would want, as Nelson said, to see at some point all of the stuff gathered into one place so that years from now when we want to look up what we did, we've got the final versions of everything all bound together. With respect to phasing, I think when we talked about doing the residential and getting a few of the buildings done and then wanting to see some commercial or industrial on the site somewhere before building 4 and 5 of the residential got started, was a discussion. And also part of the discussion for phasing was that when some commercial or industrial came online, the connectivity between the residential and whatever else is out there gets built into that too. I think those two things were what I heard discussed tonight. Does anybody else have other thoughts about what you would think about proposing for the applicant for phasing? I'm sensitive to what the applicant's needs are from the market. But
I didn't quite understand part 2 of your
Sure.
condition.
The roadway
Oh,
that
the road.
connects the residential to whatever else is over here needs to get built as a part of the whatever else over here gets built.
Agreed.
So that when that retail or whatever it is gets there, that you can get
to it, yeah, from the
yeah,
residential.
without coming out on DW Highway to get in and out of the site. Vehicular, yeah. And
Well, both. I think we want both. Yeah, yeah.
I think the applicant's already said that he wants to do the trailways, the walking trails fairly early on. Kevin?
I am not in disagreement with you as far as maybe this retail or maybe even this retail, but for some reason, if something were to get permitted over here industrially, if somebody comes in and wants to build the one that was previously approved here, and we decide to build this retail in this area, and we're talking, what, 3,500 feet or something?
Yeah, it's
quite a bit. I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but if we could maybe keep it to this general area.
So it would be excluding the portion of the site to the
maybe
north of the
yeah,
Saco Bay driveway.
excluding this
Yeah.
area here.
not permanently excluding it, but
No,
Requiring that connection at the initial,
Yeah,
if
that-
that were to be the second item.
right. I got you. I agree with you, Kevin. I think that I could support that. In terms of the phasing, the other thing that I remember that I didn't mention before is that the 5th residential building to be built will be the one that's the closest to that neighborhood to the south. That building would be last
Correct.
in the plan. And whatever the other fate order you guys wanted to do, be up to you. Lynn?
Is that public roadway through the residential area, or is it private?
All of it's going to be private,
Okay.
privately maintained.
Private, but to town standard.
Yeah.
Is there any place on this site where you would have a place where you'd park the plow truck or, maintenance building or site organization? That existing building
That
that's there?
existing building's going to stay. That's where we hope to keep all of our, whether it's sanding or lawn equipment,
Okay.
all that good stuff.
That's just the garage portion, the house is coming down, right?
The house will be coming down, correct, yeah.
Yeah. And then that's got a driveway onto DW Highway by that building now. It's gated, but it's there.
Yeah, it's there. Odds are whatever's going to be stored in that garage area is going to be used for this site. And we haven't really discussed it, but odds are we'll get rid of that access off of DW Highway, seeing there's going to be another one right here, so.
State's probably going to require that.
Yeah,
Sure. So if the board was considering granting conditional final approval to the CUP tonight, based on the phasing that we discussed, 3 residential buildings, then there's got to be some commercial
If I could, I'd summarize my notes here so that
Okay, yes,
when I'm
you-
putting together a decision letter on this, I've got it straight. 3 residential buildings permitted in the first phase. Prior to any further residential development, a non-residential portion of the site must be built. When the non-residential portion is built, the vehicular and pedestrian connections must be made between that and the residential area, excepting for if the northernmost area of the site north of the St. Cobain driveway is the second area to be developed, and that the last residential building to be constructed to be the ones closest to the neighborhood to the south.
I think you summarized it perfectly.
So
It-
just a point of clarification, I mean, we're talking about if north of the St. Cobain driveway is what gets developed second. That's really being talked about as 2 completely different projects. As we sit here and discuss interconnectivity and stuff like that, is that acceptable as the residential or the retail or commercial aspect of to move forward with the residential housing, or?
My thought is that that is separate initially because you're not going to build the connectivity in the beginning, but at full build out, it'll have connectivity all the way out to there, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, we
Yeah.
talk about phasing and getting some commercial and retail, that's way away, 35,000 feet or something like that from the residential, and so if that piece were to be built and that piece were to be built, it would look like 2 totally separate programs completely and not interconnected or anything, and so I'm not sure that satisfies the desire to see some retail commercial aspect of this conditional use permit coming in. I mean,
But it's such a large site that it's difficult to provide connectivity. And, you know, one of the things that creates the distance to, I mean, because my thought is it's probably going to be one of those buildings on the right-hand side, honestly, that would be likely to be built first, just because when you find 1 or 2 users, they're going to satisfy one of the smaller buildings, and it's going to satisfy the condition of the approval, which is going to allow the residential development to go forward. It doesn't mean that the commercial development is on hold, but if you recall, the first plan that we came in with had a building and a separate parking. And every building had its own parking pod, and you could easily, and some of the comments that we received was that didn't feel like it was one project and all together, and we made pretty significant revisions to the plan to try to address pedestrian connectivity and give it, you know, kind of an outlet feel. But because of that, it's going to take more users to build that part of the project. So that kind of plays into the, you know, how feasible it is for the project to be built left to right. I think the connectivity portion will certainly come into play, and it sounds like it'll be a condition of the approval anyways, once the, you know, that large part of the retail is built. But my concern would be that, you know, we don't want to get penalized for the size of the project and the layout of the site necessarily. Well, we're certainly trying to meet the intent of the regulations. The goal is going to be, I mean, I can assure you, once we get through the conditional use part of this project, based on my experience with the Flatley Company, that this land will be marketed quite extensively, and, you know, none of this may even be an issue, but out of the gate, I think, you know, one of those buildings on the right-hand side is likely to be the part that satisfies or is to be occupied first.
Sure. I understand Tom's question and concern because, you know, if you end up, especially if it's the ones north of the driveway for St. Cobain and there's no connectivity, it won't really have much of a sense of being a master planned site, although maybe you've got the common architecture piece of it. But that said, when we most recently considered the one in the south end of town, we took residential plus a gas station and said that gets you over the threshold, and that's a fairly low bar to target.
And you're also talking about a significantly smaller site down there, where there's the opportunity for the connections and the proximity is much greater on that site than it is here, just because of the sheer size of this parcel.
Even the distance from here to here, we're talking 1,600, 1,700 feet.
Yeah, I know, you and I walked in.
It's bit of a hike.
But you're
I mean,
just
would-
talking about that big box some more. I mean,
Yeah, I know, I hear you.
No question. I think it's not, certainly not optimal to say, you know, the building on the other end is not going to be connected. But in terms of does it meet the criteria of putting mixed use? It's not what I would consider optimal, but I think that it meets the bare minimum. And in order to get the understanding all the pressures that the applicant's under and what the market does to you as you try to fill it up, I'm inclined to look favorably on it, but I don't know if other folks think it differently. Nelson?
Yeah. No, it's not a happy situation. I don't see why you would build the northernmost building, why it's necessary to build that building sooner than one of the three, let's say, the three triplets there that are all
The
about
one's
the
right in
same
front of St.
size.
Cobain.
Unless
Yeah.
it's the High Bay warehouse.
I was going to say, if it's that,
If it's
that
the
easy,
industrial
that's-
use.
That's if somebody wants a high bay warehouse. That's the only high bay.
Oh, I
warehouse.
wasn't talking about the High Bay
No,
warehouse.
but that would give them the moment that goes up, they can
That's-
build in 4 and 5.
And again, we've had a couple of people interested in the High Bay area, and one of the thoughts, and I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, is, you know, if they're working here and there's housing over here, it would be nice to put something in here. And I know we'd just, and then again, there's nothing on the plate right now, but you know, it'd be nice for a sub shop or maybe a UPS type thing or something along those lines, something they could walk to easily enough. You know, in this area here, we still obviously intend on putting a connection in there for future use. I guess one question I have is, and again, this is obviously just a board decision, but if these people don't want the connection, if they, and I'm just saying, maybe they do, which is great, but if they were to come to a meeting and say, you know, we just don't want to be connected directly, we're fine with driving out on a DW highway and going, we don't want anybody coming in here unless it's, you know, police or fire through an emergency access. I mean, I don't know if that's.
I think that's ultimately a decision the board would have to make at time of site plan for those other projects.
Yeah, I think that you would, although I'd still be inclined to see the connection so that you don't have the traffic out on the highway and all of that. And also, as does almost every other applicant, you sort of, when you're the next guy down the line, you take your property based on the approvals that were issued to the guy that owned it when when the ground was broken, and that may include, you know, power line easements or sewer line easements or all sorts of things that you might look at eventually and say, hey, I don't want that. Matter of fact, I fully worry that the people in the building closest to the residential building closest to that big box are going to not be thrilled 10 years from now when that plan hits the table and they go, I didn't know anything about this. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
guaranteed.
And we're going to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I stood on the corner of that building, and you described the berm that was going to be there and where it was going to be and what we could do for trees and plantings on top of it, and had all that discussion. But I guarantee you, I bet you my paycheck when that site plan hits the table. Hopefully, I'm still here, Nelson. I'm going to be the chairman for that long. The people in that apartment building are going to go, "What in the is this?" I didn't know anything about this. I don't want to see the back of Home Depot or whatever goes there.
48 people sitting behind me at the hearing.
Yeah, no question. But nevertheless, that's part of the site plan, and everybody is charged with having knowledge of what's gone into their history of their property through their deeds and all of that stuff. But they don't. I
Right,
mean,
yeah, I know.
Chestnut Hill subdivision has got people that are abutting it who have no idea that there's a public right-of-way right behind their house. And they don't want it to be there, but
How much you can do about it, yeah.
didn't invent it. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
so that's the concern with that.
Were you gonna just rent those apartments, or are you leasing them or
Rental.
selling them?
Be rentals.
They're rentals.
The rentals are be
they could leave
owned
it
and
to-
maintained by the company, yeah.
So where do we stand with what we want to propose for the applicant to do phasing wise? What's acceptable to us? based on Tom's comments and questions. Desiree?
Tim's. Go ahead. Go ahead, Desiree.
What Tim had read and documented all the way up to the north end being separated, like no connectivity if it was on the north side. I'm comfortable with that. I agree that it's not ideal, but it's a huge property, and in High Bay Industrial is still going to feel very different than anything else over there. So that it's not connected,
Yeah, putting a
in this
sidewalk
case,
to
I
it.
think
You gotta
it will-
remember, St. Cobain's right there too, so it's
Yeah.
not like you're,
yeah. Until all that stuff's built out, it'd be good to keep the trees there anyways to hide St. Gobain as long as it can be hidden.
What trees are you talking about?
The ones that block St. Gobain from the road right now.
They're not coming out anyway, if I remember our site walk.
No, there are
The
some
ones
of
right along the highway there are not on their property, most of them aren't.
There'll be a small row here, and if you remember, when we looked out onto the highway, there was a little bit of a berm through here, and these trees were pretty thick, so.
Yeah, there's a difference in elevation. The highway's a little bit, I don't know how many feet, but a little bit higher than
yeah.
the level where those buildings would be sitting.
So the trees along the roadside stay?
All
Most of
this
them,
dark
yeah. For those
area
ones.
trees that we hope are gonna
Oh,
stay as is,
And then further down by the other three buildings too, right?
all through here.
Yeah, all through there.
Yes.
All through here,
fantastic.
all through here. This gap here is actually an existing path that comes through. There's not much we can do there, but.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion that we grant final approval for the conditional use permit according to the memo written by Gillian Harris dated November the 13th with the amendments as outlined by Mr. Thompson here this evening. And as far as item 3 is concerned, the word "if required by the planning board" shall be struck out and the applicant shall provide for review. Shall provide for review by the town's legal development agreement. Otherwise, based on that letter, what Mr. Thompson read out as sort of our phasing agreements and everything else, I make a motion we grant conditional, final acceptance for a conditional use permit.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Second, that's right. Zina and Tim, do you sufficiently understand that motion to capture it in minutes? Excellent. Nelson?
I would like to add one more thing. You're up to 10 conditions now, and I would like to say the submittal of a complete package that incorporates the agreements made in this for this conditional use permit.
I'll modify condition number 1 appropriately.
It's condition number 1, Nelson,
Oh,
if you
okay.
read it.
Okay.
It
Okay.
basically covers it. That's why I didn't make a specific
So we're happy with
I'll
that?
modify that slightly to just read the updated project packet and fiscal impact.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Is that happy, Nelson?
I'm not sure. I'm on number 1, and it has to do with does not authorize the applicant to
That's
undertake.
general condition
That's
1.
look at page 2, Nelson.
Up on the top is the precedent conditions.
On the top of the same page you're reading here.
Okay.
There are 7
Okay.
precedent conditions and then 10 general and subsequent. The 7 precedent conditions will be what needs to be addressed prior to the planning board endorsing the final approval. The general conditions will run with the project for the entirety of the duration.
Okay. It doesn't seem to talk about shall include an updated and final fiscal impact analysis as part of the project package. What I was trying to get at was a
Yep.
project package.
I've just made that modification to it, to include the words project package and fiscal impact. So that is all
Okay.
part of the same condition.
All right, as long as, okay.
He's going to tweak the language for us a little bit to make that work. Any other comments or questions? Tom?
I guess the only addition, change, or modification I would look for was, is it possible, I mean, we say, I believe you said in there, the first 3 buildings, residential buildings, could go up before the other requirement, and then the 4th and 5th would be cut loose and available. Would it be possible to split that and have before the 5th one is set up, we need something in this retail area south of the St. Cobain driveway to be planned and
So you have the okay to do 4 buildings.
Three, then you got to have
3,
some
then you have to have
commercial.
something. It can be up in the far
and
north.
then you get another one, then you got to do something south of St. Gobain's driveway with the connectivity, and then you get your 5th residential building. I think that's what Tom suggested.
That's what I'm trying to suggest is a compromise to give us a little bit
So you do your residential
more-
in 3
more of a
bunches,
hook
in
into
3
the-
groups.
into the phasing.
I guess the only real issue is if the industrial building gets built as approved, that my honest thought is that retail up front would be the next one. Now, that's not to say,
Just for clarification purposes, Kevin, if the existing approved plan for the high bay in the location it was previously
Right.
approved, that would not really count for this because it's outside of the boundary of the conditional.
that I
use permit.
understand. But my point is, the odds are we would probably want to build the closest retail area, whether it's for convenience store or
Yeah.
you know, that type of small restaurant, that type of thing.
Well,
I'm just looking for some kind of hook to get back south of the South St. Gobain driveway and get something started in that area. And I'm willing to say, okay, you can have 4 of your residential buildings, 4 stories high. I'm just asking for some hook that says, you know, before you can completely complete that, you need to show progress.
But it's
And I have no
not,
doubt that you're doing everything you can. I'm not trying to disparage your company or anything. I'm just burned by other people that have come in and said, well, gee, we tried and we couldn't do it. You look at Shaw's North up there, they tried and they couldn't do anything else with their property, and all we have is this brick building out in the middle of nothing.
Yeah.
And other residential areas that were planned to have things going on where they want to convert from commercial to residential and things of that. It just happens, and the board looks really silly afterwards when we didn't ask enough questions or put down enough requirements or restrictions or requests to try and do our best to get the project to go through.
just to clarify though, it's not 4. That is it 4 up front, or would it be?
No, it's
No.
3 up front plus something. If it happens to be north of St. Gobain, then you have to do something else to get the 5th one. You get the 4th one if you do something. You get the 5th one if you've got something south of the St. Gobain driveway.
That doesn't sound if it doesn't sound overly appealing. I mean, because we would be required to do more than meet the letter of the law necessarily,
Is there any,
right?
Letter of the what?
Well, the regulations require a commercial element, which we would be doing,
Yeah, it also requires a master plan connected site. So
Yeah.
and that's what we've provided. But we're going to try to
Okay.
make it all happen. There's just a lot of infrastructure.
Oh, and I think that you guys will, but what I think Tom is saying is you get 3 residential buildings, you start off with that, 3 residential buildings. Then you got to add a commercial element to it. And that may be the ones to the north of St. Gobain, and if so, you don't have to connect it, and you get a 4th building in the residential. The 5th building doesn't get built until there's some connectivity and commercial south of St. Gobain. So 3, then you got to have some commercial, you get another one, then you got to have some commercial and the connectivity
Right.
to be the master planned site before you get that 5th
And
residential building.
And if your second commercial goes in is one of these larger ones that's south of there,
You're
then you
done.
get 4 and 5.
You get the whole thing all at once.
Yeah. Then you've satisfied everything if you've got some of that commercial south of St. Gobain's driveway.
I guess I'm just looking at the plan and trying to acknowledge the amount of infrastructure that the commercial in the center of the project will require. I mean, the connectivity is one element. So to me, it doesn't feel like one building triggers the whole development in that center portion. There's going to need to be more users than one building. So it turns into it's just a bigger project, and it's going to take. I think that could take a little bit of time to gather those users. So my thought is that it's certainly not desirable probably to have that option.
Sure. When we talk about one building in the middle triggering something, I don't know that we're triggering all manner of infrastructure. We're talking about the vehicular and pedestrian connectivity. So, and a lot of that, I mean, there's already a road that comes off the end of the St. Gobain driveway, and I know you're not reusing it for anything here, but you know, somebody went out there and built all that pavement just for nothing. And to say that we can't build it for one building, I mean, if it makes economic sense to move ahead with the project, at some point, that infrastructure's got to be supported by what you're doing. I think the other possibility to consider is, and I don't know how this fits in, and Tim may tell me that I can't do it, but whether there's some element of bonding that can be put forward to see work get done within a particular time.
Not at this stage of the game. It would be a site plan type of question at that point.
So when the residential site plan came forward, we could have them bond that connective infrastructure into the other sites?
Potentially. It's an alternative the board could consider at that point.
And that way, you basically, the bond is just buying you time, and it's, I don't know how many years it is, but do whatever you want within that period of time. If you don't get it done within 3 years, then the bond gets called and somebody else comes to build your connectivity with that money from the town. I don't know if that's helpful or that just makes things more difficult, more expensive, more complicated.
A little more complicated. That's because we don't know. We just don't know who's, you know. I mean, somebody's going to be in there in 3 years. That I'm
Yeah, that's the thing that I was thinking about before when I kind of went through the calendar and we got to 2016 before these residentials would be going. So that's when you'd have to have some commercial, and I suppose 9 more months, a year before you'd get to the next residential building being done. We're talking about 2017, 2018 before you'd be looking to need to have those buildings built south of the St. Gobain, something built south of the St. Gobain driveway. That's, I mean, for an aggressive marketing department that's doing their best to get there,
with you.
I think you'd probably have a result by then, wouldn't you?
So does the board...
Is there any chance to meet in the middle and say we can have occupancy on 4 of the 5 buildings, and we will have a site plan in prior to 216, so 16, so it'd be, I mean, before occupancy.
So you would have 4 residential buildings, and then you would have commercial south of the St. Gobain driveway with the connectivity before you got your 5th residential building? Is that what you're proposing?
Before we get occupancy on the 5th residential building.
Before you get occupancy on the 5th residential building?
Odds are he'd want to build it all at the same time just because it would obviously make sense site-wise and economically, but yeah, not necessarily not have occupancy.
So that's similar to what Tom was saying in terms of when the 5th building would be allowed. It happens when there's some commercial south of St. Gobain. The 4th building you get earlier.
Automatically, it's getting forced
Right from the beginning. There wouldn't have to be any of the warehouse or something to the north or anything else on the site.
Which would still probably go up. Just I want to reiterate that we're probably going to have some sort of warehouse and some sort of building there, but I'm committing to south of the St. Gobain for the 4th building, basically.
When we did the one on the south end of town, we told them they could have all 5 of their residential with a gas station. So saying 4...
I'd go along with what he suggested.
And the difference being is their first phase was infrastructure prior to anything else.
Yeah.
Because it's a smaller site, they're planning to do all the infrastructure later with the road work and the connectivity as part of phase 1. So
although virtually all of their infrastructure leads to the
for the residential, exactly. Given the relative
really
smaller site that we have there.
4 residentials and then some commercial as a part of that beginning on the area to the south of St. Gobain. What do you guys think?
It's okay.
Works for everybody? I could go along
Commercial or what if the restaurant comes in? I'm just
Yeah,
throwing
that
it out.
counts.
South of St. Gobain driveway, yeah.
So, as I'm modifying this, we're now at 4 residential buildings and then non-residential portions south of St. Gobain driveway with connectivity.
Yes. And then after that, proceed with whatever phasing you want.
Got it.
Is that consistent with the maker of the motion? Will you amend your motion?
I'll accept the amended motion.
Will the seconder of the motion amend the motion?
I will accept.
All right. Is there any other discussion by the board with respect to the entire project or the phasing? There being no other discussion, let's have the question. All in favor of granting conditional final approval, subject to all of the things we've discussed that Tim's so eloquently recited to us, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0 for your final approval.
Thank you much.
Thank you guys
Appreciate
for
it.
working through the project. I think you
Thank
did a
you. We
really great
appreciate it,
job
too.
with complicated stuff.
We'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll see you after Christmas with the site plans.
Yes.
Won't
Yeah,
take
have a
long
good
now.
Thanksgiving, Christmas, everyone.
Right.
You
Absolutely.
too, thank you.
Item number 5 on our agenda is Kathleen and Carlisle Hatfield and Richard and Christine Hatfield as co-applicants and co-owners. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of an application for a lot consolidation and lot line adjustment plan located at 9 and 11 Autumn Lane and 44 and 46 Greenwood Road in the R1 Residential and Flood Hazard Conservation Districts, tax map 6A-1, lot 69, 70, 98, and 99. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicants?
Just to make the board aware that the applicant was in front of the zoning board last month, at which the zoning board granted 3 variances. The first of those variances allows for the proposed lots to have less than the required 100,000 square feet of lot area. The second allows the 2 resulting lots that will remain after this project to have less than 250 feet of frontage. Then lastly, there was a setback variance to allow for a building addition closer to the rear property line. The first 2 of these are really applicable to this application. Ultimately, what the applicant is proposing to do, there are currently 4 residential lots. This is out at Babusick Lake. A portion of 2 of the lots are actually located both in Merrimack and in Amherst, so approval from the Town of Amherst Planning Board will also be required on this project. Ultimately, there are 3 existing residential structures out there, 2 permanent year-round homes, and a seasonal campground. The seasonal camp will be demolished as part of this project, and the result will be 2 more conforming residential lots than currently exist in the 4 lots that are there today. And it will also eliminate the need for a septic easement across one of the properties once the lots are reconfigured as currently exists out there. It seems like a relatively complex project, but it's really, bottom line, cleaning up a bunch of small non-conforming lots and making 2 more conforming lots to the ordinance.
Thank you, Tim, for that explanation. Thank you guys for sitting through the prior application, which was kind of a long one to discuss. Do your best to tell us what you got going on here, and if you could point out on your plan where the residential structures that are staying are going to be and where the ones that are going away are. And with that, please don't forget to sign in, introduce yourself, and tell us what's about your project.
Hi, my name is Catherine Basso. I'm an engineer at Keach Nordstrom Associates, and I'm representing the Hatfield family tonight. Before I get really started, I have a color exhibit. If you would like to accept it, I could hand them out to you. It just might give you
Certainly.
a better idea.
Sure.
It's just kind of hard to tell in black and white.
It made a lot of difference with the zoning board.
Yes, I understand.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I thank you. Oh, yes, that does explain it a bit better.
Okay, so as Tim said earlier, it involves 4 parcels, 2 of which are partly in Amherst. And on November 5th, we got approval from the planning board from the town of Amherst for this project. It's located on Autumn Circle and Greenwood Road, and it fronts Babusick Lake as well. So there are 2 main principal residences for the Hatfield family, and they have existing on-site wells and septic systems. The existing residents, I will point them out right now, this one and this one. Those 2 will remain, the one on the blue property and the one on the pink property.
Okay.
The one on the green property is just a camp that's vacant, and that will be taken down.
Okay.
So basically, we're proposing a consolidation and adjustment. It's taking 4 non-conforming properties and making them into 2. The red property up top houses the septic system for the pink property down the bottom. So the consolidation will also help give them access to their driveway and the septic system without requiring the easements that are already there. They will no longer need them. That page 2 shows the proposed lot line the red and blue.
So the septic system for the lot on the house on the pink property, is that far away from the place?
Yes.
Wow. Now it says existing tent on the orange parcel, which I guess is gonna be part of the still orange parcel.
Yep.
What's it,
That should just remain. It's just like a.
a campsite, or there's actually a tent?
It's not like a tent that you would go camping in. It's like
Just a canopy or something?
just yeah, kind of like that. It's just like a frame and got a roof on it, like a plastic
A roof.
Okay.
type
One of
thing.
those plastic garages.
Yeah, kind of like that. It's definitely not like a
Okay.
pop-up camp that you
I
use.
think I know
or
what that is,
anything
but
like
that's staying?
Yes, that should stay.
Okay.
That's my knowledge. So as I said, it will allow them full access to their driveway when it's complete. And as he also said, we went before the zoning board and they gave us all the variances we requested.
There's a driveway running through here. It looks like this Greenwood Road, is
Yeah.
that their access to their home?
That's their access. It's a private gravel road.
And
And right now there's an easement that goes across because it goes through the blue property right now, so they need an easement.
So where does Greenwood Road join with a public road?
Greenwood Road is in Amherst.
Oh, okay.
oh, where's
Oh,
the
okay.
town line? No, Greenwood Road's in Merrimack here.
Well, it
Oh,
is.
this
Part of
piece
it,
of it
but
is,
the, there's another part.
It doesn't
that is
join a
in
public
Amherst.
road until
Okay.
Amherst.
Okay.
So could I just ask the question, do the two lots, that's not lot 96, which is Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, and lot 100, which Mr. and Mrs. Longer, where do they get their access from? Because you've drawn Greenwood Road as being in the blue zone, or pretty well in the blue zone. So how do those two lot 96 and 100, which are the ones to the left there, how do they get into their lots?
I believe in the Amherst side of Greenwood Road.
You believe? So they're coming in through Amherst?
Well, they're definitely coming in through Amherst. It's just where off of Greenwood Road do they?
How do you
actually
get
have
on
a
those
driveway?
sites is what I was trying to understand.
This is Christine Hatfield. She's knows
Yeah.
better.
All right, so Mr. Taylor's lot is right here.
Can I interrupt you? I don't mean to be, but you got to get a microphone so the folks at home can see. Here, you grab that one that's on the stand over there and take it with you. I apologize for interrupting you. Just want to make sure the folks at home can hear. Yes, please do introduce yourself.
I'm Christine Hatfield. We own this property down here.
Okay.
And this is our road. So the Greenwood Road starts, this is the end of Greenwood Road. This
Okay.
is the beginning of our property and right-of-way. So
Okay.
the Taylor's house is right here, and they just access right from the road. And Jack and Jeannie Long's house is down here, and their access begins right here.
So they don't come off of the private driveway that's labeled Greenwood Road on the plan that we're looking at?
No, actually, all of our mailboxes are right here, so that's the end of Greenwood Road. So even though this says Greenwood Road, it's actually our driveway. It's our right-of-way.
Okay.
Okay.
On the maps that we have, it doesn't show Greenwood Road in Amherst, which is where the access is.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's what's confusing.
I got you.
Okay.
Yeah, that almost vertical line going across the map is the town line between Amherst and
So-
nothing is drawn on the Amherst side for us, so.
Yeah.
I believe that the road goes like this. So that's why it's a little confusing. So this is Mr. Taylor's property right here.
Oh, yeah, that's up to you.
And in fact,
So
now I look at it, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor have actually got another lot, 95 as well as 96, so they've probably got double access anyway. I didn't see that bit.
That one's mislabeled on the plan. We actually got talked to by the abutter. He got notified properly, but on the plan it was just a misspelling.
Oh, okay.
It's a different person.
So basically from here, you can see this lot.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
lot have access to there.
There it is.
Yeah, I see it now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Hatfield, for doing that. And Catherine, please continue.
If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Simple
Mr.
enough.
Chairman, given with what we've already heard, can I make a motion that we accept this matter for review?
As motion accepted, is there a second for it? Second by Mr. Disco. All in favor of accepting jurisdiction of the application, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0 for that. And we have no waiver requests.
Just to note, in the regulations, there are sections of the ordinance, of the regulations that are deemed not applicable as long as the planning board is comfortable with that. So a great number of sections that typically would apply to a subdivision do not apply to a lot line adjustment of this type of nature. So that's why there are not any particular waiver requests.
I gotcha. What's the will of the board in terms of questions for the applicant, discussion, or potential final action? Yeah, let's do that. Thanks, Tim, for keeping me in line. Any members of the public wish to weigh in and offer the board some information on this application before we consider taking final action? Anybody? Going once, twice? Okay. Thanks, Tim. We'll close the public hearing. Now what's the will of the board in terms of either
Mr. Chairman, I
discussion?
make a motion we accept this application for the lot consolidation and lot line adjustment based on the memos submitted by Mr. Thompson dated November 13th, 2014 with the conditions as outlined.
So motion to grant conditional final approval with the conditions outlined in the memo. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Nelson beat you to it.
Okay.
Nelson Disco is the second for the motion. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0. Thank you for the wait.
The next one.
All right, our next one is Sanford Surveying and Engineering Incorporated as the applicant, and Christopher Condon and Barbara Watson as the owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of an application for a lot line adjustment lot line adjustment plan located at 102 and 108 Wilson Hill Road in the R1 Residential District, tax map 4B, lot 114-4 and 114-6. Tim, is there anything that we should know before we hear from the applicant?
Again, this is a relatively straightforward lot line adjustment. The two property owners are seeking to adjust a portion of slightly less than an acre from the large lot 114-6 to the smaller lot of 114-4. The purpose for this is to locate a replacement well for the benefit of lot 114-4. There currently is not sufficient area on the property to do so. The two property owners have come to an agreement to exchange some properties so that that can be accomplished.
On this aerial map that we have with the yellow and the orange, which one's 114-4, which one's 114-6?
14.4 is the triangular one, and 14.6 is the large lump.
Orange.
Orange, sorry.
Yellow.
Well, triangular. It's nearly triangular.
So this is 4 and this is 6. Gotcha. Thank you. Please introduce yourself. Don't forget to sign in and tell us about your proposal.
Evening, my name is Raymond Shea from Sanford Surveying, and this is Chris Condon, one of the co-owners of the property. As Tim said, this is a lot line adjustment between two properties, common ownership between the two. Chris is half owner, his mother owns the other half, and they both own both lots. The northerly lot is a 2.3 acre lot. Has a house that was just constructed on it. The other lot is approximately 45.5 acres. It's the remaining land of where the frontage lots were originally cut out of a few years ago. The house on the smaller lot was just constructed. They drilled a well with a very low yield, and they felt they needed to get another well. And going back further on the lot narrows down, so the well radius, you couldn't get a well with a well radius on a lot. So they moved down into the next property, which was also theirs, and they drilled a very good well. So the proposal is to annex that acre or so, which contains the new well, to the house lot. So this former line is in this area, and this triangular piece will be annexed to the northerly small house lot.
Okay. Is there any questions of the applicant for the board before we
Mr. Chairman, I
consider?
make a motion we accept this matter for review.
Motion to accept it as complete. Second by Ms. Fault. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to accept it. Again, there are no waivers requested.
General public.
Is any member of the public or butters wish to weigh in on the application? Seeing none, pass the public hearing portion of it. Is there any discussion by the board, questions for the applicant, or potential final action on this proposal? Tom?
I would just point out that this was not at all clear to me what you were trying to do. And it wouldn't have been really hard to mark out the lines a little stronger or make it a little bit more obvious what adjustments you were making. When I grabbed this packet and started looking at it, I had no idea what was going on. And just for further comment for future times, it's a little bit easier to put up with if you can see clearly what. And maybe the narrative tried to do that, but I couldn't catch it. But
we labeled the old lot line. It's in.
well, this picture I got, the lines are so small and faint,
The only thing you
not
got
colored, and
the
everything
only
else.
you got was that old lot line dotted.
I'll make
Yeah,
sure
well,
Tim,
anything
I'll
that
make sure
told
Tim
you.
gives you the bigger plans.
You're right.
Yeah. You also had a disadvantage in that the applicant before you gave us these nice colored ones that defined everything so clearly. So.
Theirs was a pretty complicated one. I would have colored one too if it was that complicated.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you for the comment, Tom. Are there any other comments or questions? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we grant this matter for
Additional
final
approval.
acceptance based on the letter from Mr. Thompson dated November 13th, 2014.
Is there a second for the motion to grant conditional final approval? Mr. Disco is a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600. Thank you for the
Thank
wait.
you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience as you waited through the longer one. Picking up speed here a little bit. Item number 7 on our agenda is Jesse Frazier as the applicant and owner, Bluebird Enterprises. Review for consideration of final approval of an application to permit a home occupation for an animal control service business in the R Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts located at 144 Wire Road, tax map 7C, lot 19 and 20. And I would point out for the board's benefit that we also have item 8 on the agenda, which is actually the consideration of the site of where the material storage is, and that this first one is simply the home occupation business.
Correct, and you just summarized what I was going to say.
I'm sorry, Tim, I stole your job for the evening. Mr. Frazier, thank you for
Good
coming
evening,
back again. Please introduce yourself for the record, sign in, and tell us where we're at with your project.
All right, Jesse Frazier, owner of Critter Control of New Hampshire. We own 2 lots, one at 144 Wire Road, which is our residence, and we also own 140 to 142 Wire Road, which was a open lot when we purchased it, and that is the second half of us for the planning portion to allow, hopefully allow acceptance of a storage trailer, which is existing. I do have some pictures. Do you guys want those now for after photos of screening and things that we discussed?
For the second one,
for
when we
second.
get to item number 8 on the agenda,
Okay.
do go with that one. But for now, let's stick with just the
occupation.
home occupation piece
All
of
right.
it. And I think when we were here last, you were talking about doing answering the phone and doing the bills and basically dispatching the company from there. But there's no visible evidence of a business.
No
going on.
visible evidence of the business at our home. My wife runs the office, so she handles primarily accounting.
Yep.
Any phone calls are routed through the phones to my cell phones.
Okay, so to go through some of the items that are typically on a home occupation, you won't have any customers coming to the site.
Correct.
No parking needs, no signage,
We're a
no
service-based
employees.
business, so nothing.
No employees coming to the site. How many square feet within your building would be used for the?
I think it's 80 square feet, I think is what it is.
small area. Are there any other criteria of a home occupation that I haven't touched on?
It's right in there, I think you've covered the main ones.
Okay.
Just,
Yeah. What's the will of the board in terms of accepting the application? as complete?
before you go from this list, there was a part about visible to the neighborhood, and there was an issue with the dumpster on this property last time. It was raised by some of the neighbors.
Which has been corrected. We have screening on that. Would you guys like those photos?
Yeah, well, eventually.
Yeah,
I'd like to see it,
but
Is
go ahead
that
and
on
pass
the house portion of the lot, or is that
The
on
dumpster is on the house portion, I thought.
Cheers.
This is the dumpster.
To be annexed to lot
Thank
7C20.
Are they doing a lot line
No,
adjustment?
that's just the plan.
Oh.
Here we go.
Sounds like giving Zina a terrible time with 5 conversations at once.
He's doing pretty good, I think.
So you put a stockade fence around, here you go.
Oh, fine. thank you.
Stockade fence around the front of the dumpster so it's no longer visible.
Exactly, and has hinges so that Woodville
Sorry,
Waste
John.
Management can access it, and that's per their standards, which is what's per the state of New Hampshire,
Okay.
as far as size.
So-
It's about 8 by 20.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. In terms of procedure, the first thing the board's got to consider is whether the application's complete and we can accept jurisdiction.
We've done that.
It's on the memo.
For home occupation, there's no acceptance because it's not a site plan.
It's just final consideration.
Put it in your memo.
I'll remind Donna about that.
You messed
Now
it
you're
up.
I
in
just read what
trouble.
it says here, you see.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't have to accept, we don't have to consider. No question. All right, so we don't have to decide that it's complete. We can consider, we can decide final disposition of the home occupation. Is there any questions for the applicant with respect to the business he proposes to do at, I guess the first one was 20 was the home, is that right? Or 19 was?
20 is the home and 19
20 is
is
the
the,
home,
yes.
Okay. On lot 20, Tom?
So there were 2 questions that came up. You've obviously addressed one with screening the dumpster. The other one was there was some concern by neighbors about vehicle repairs and stuff like that. Have you addressed that with them, or have you? done
Haven't addressed that
anything?
with them. I knew we were going to be bringing that up. I wasn't sure if that was going to be under application
that's part
7
of
or
this.
8.
Well, but it was done on this property, right? Not on the other property.
No, it's on the storage shed property.
I
where the waste-
think my neighbors had seen me when I was working on the truck at my home, I believe.
That's
So
and the
that was
home is
this
what we're
property.
talking about. No.
Yeah.
Okay, no, you're right. You're
He's right, yeah.
Okay.
Tom's right, yeah.
Okay.
I'm okay with you guys putting that we can't work on company vehicles on any of the properties as far as fluid changes and things like that. Changing a wiper, putting a headlight in, I assume that's okay. But as long as we're not doing major reconstruction and springs and oil changes and
Repairs
everything
and
else.
drop the engine and
Yeah.
change the pistons, all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah.
Right, exactly. As far as the work vehicles and everything.
So the applicant's representing that he's willing to accept a no maintenance limitation other than wiper blades and
For company
minor-
vehicles, yes.
minor things.
Minor standard.
For company vehicles.
For company vehicles,
Yeah.
yes. Obviously, we can't restrict your home vehicles as a part of a home occupation.
Right.
Your personal vehicles as a part of that. Okay, so what's the will of the board with respect to the home occupation piece of the puzzle? That's not in the memo. Does anybody wish to weigh in on the home occupation piece of the application? Any abutters or interested citizen? No?
No.
Okay. Close the public hearing, but thank you for reminding me. Get this right. Sooner or later.
It's the end of the night, it's all good, guys.
More discussion? Final action.
Just for the boards, the recommended conditions, basically the first condition is site plan approval of the associated item, and then number 2 will be limiting to minor vehicle maintenance only as discussed.
Okay.
Okay.
That's satisfactory to me.
It says that.
Any other comments or questions? What's the will of the board?
I move we accept the plan for home occupation.
Move to grant permission for the home occupation by Nelson. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Second by Ms. Fault. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 for to grant the home occupation as item 7. Item 8 on our agenda is also Jesse Frazier as the applicant and owner of Bluebird Enterprises and review for acceptance of consideration of final approval of an application for a waiver of full site plan review for site improvements associated with a home occupation for an animal control business in the R Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts located at 144 Wire Road and the adjacent unnumbered parcel, tax map 7C, lots 19 and 20. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we consider this case?
I think you guys are actually better up to speed on this project than I am, having not been here for 2 months. So I think Donna's memo covers it with the recommendations from staff and the conditions.
And I'd also note that the photograph that Mr. Frazier passed out, the top photograph, is actually the storage site that we're dealing with now.
That is correct.
The bottom photograph was the home site for the home occupation. Mr. Frazier, is there anything that you want to tell us about what we got going on the site and update us on anything we discussed last time?
Give you guys a short history. We purchased the lot March of 11. The lot was previously cleared to that by Lomontane Builders, who purchased the lot at the fire sale that the town had. shortly thereafter, we moved our storage trailer there when we closed our Seacoast office and moved operations to Merrimack. And then after that, we got some letters from the town saying, hey, we need to do some things with you guys, which we promptly started here. So part of, from last time, was to add screening across the front. We had an existing 6-foot stockade fence. The trailer is 40 feet long. It was a 68-foot stockade fence. You guys had wanted more screening, so we planted 6 10 to 12-foot trees directly in front, adjacent to the roadway. We added another section of stockade fence, and we also planted 2 more 10-foot tall trees there as well, too.
Okay, so it's
So
clear that that's
hopefully,
not a
screening
driveway, and you've got
everything.
some screening that will continue to fill in over time.
It will grow over time, you get it.
We already talked about vehicle maintenance related to the other application, but that ties to this one as well, the
That can,
the same
yeah, that's fine.
restriction. You mentioned before that you have no power, no water connected to this storage trailer,
No power, no water, no plans for power or water.
and it's for the storage of construction supplies, materials and supplies, not
That's
for
correct.
critters waiting for their dispositions.
We do not bring any animals home. We primarily live trap and relocate elsewhere, or we use a one-way valve system, which allows animals to exit people's properties, but not having to be trapped. We don't use any chemicals, so there's no chemical storage.
So there would be no chemical storage.
We do not use a chemical.
I just want you to positively
Yep.
say there will be no
We are a
chemical
wildlife
storage.
control firm. We are not a pest control firm.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if there's, you understand that if there's any changes in the future where you want to add electricity or do something different on the site or whatever, you got to come back and get us a
Come see
update
Donna
on
and
that.
go through the process again. You got it.
I'm sure you're looking forward to the opportunity
Oh,
to do that.
so much so. It wasn't that bad. So
Thank you for that kindness, although I think we interrogated.
For someone
you.
who, to say that after going through enforcement action, I'm very pleased to hear that.
Thank you for that. Is there any other questions by members of the board? For the
Yes, Mr.
applicant?
Chairman, I took a ride out there this morning, and really it relates to the fact that the gentleman is looking for a waiver of site plan review. I've certainly seen a shed that is there, which is not on the plan. I was able to see that from the road.
that's on my house then.
What?
That's on
No,
my-
there's also on the Bedford side of your house, there is also what looks like a
hoop house.
Hmm?
A hoop house. A carport.
Well, that's what I thought it was, but
Right.
there is what looks like a more solid shed on lot 20, not lot 19.
There's no other structures on that building. There is the 40-foot storage container.
Yeah, and there's
There's
a
a hoop
shed-like
house.
thing alongside it.
I've got a 12-foot camper trailer over there where you may be seeing the top of that. I have 3 trucks over there. I have a Dodge, I have a plow truck, I have a boat, and I have
Well,
I have an aerial of this one.
and there's a hoop house over there as well. That's the only structure I have on that property.
well, that's my first comment. And the second comment, which I also would make, is I love your photograph, which looks beautiful on a bright sunny day. When I looked at it today, which was not a bright sunny day,
That photograph was taken this afternoon. actually.
well, it wasn't this morning at 9:30. I just felt that your stockade fence really doesn't screen that as well. Now, I accept when those trees grow to maturity, it'll probably will do, but I'm just making a comment that I felt that the trailer, or whatever you like to call it, is certainly a bit more of an eyesore than your picture makes out. But we have to hope the trees will do it. That's my real thought.
How
That
tall is
can
the
only
stockade fence?
6 foot, which is pretty much as high as you can buy
And
things.
the photograph is also is extended the distance here. Actually, if you're sitting in the road here, it's much closer than it looks. But that's just
I'm standing on
No,
the
fair
opposite side of the road, but
yeah.
Fair enough. So, if the stockade fence that I'm seeing in the top picture is 6 feet tall, the trailer is 12 feet tall. It's a good 6 feet above it, or is
I think
height
it
is the
stands
fence?
about 5 feet above the stockade fence.
Okay.
8-foot walls, it's about 2 feet off the ground. So
And it's certainly a bit dilapidated in terms of the outside of that trailer. That's sort of, you've got it all as though it looks as all one colour, and it doesn't look quite as nice as that. I'm only just making a point.
If these trees do well,
They will be
they'll
all right.
block that in a very short period of
You
time.
have to hope that the trees do well.
I assume that if any of these trees grow on you, you're going to replant them. with
that's my
something
plan.
else.
Plan is also that they don't go bad because they were about $350 a piece.
Yeah.
Any buffering that's shown on a plan like this, if it's no longer effective, would be something we require to be replaced.
Be an enforcement issue. Okay. We have not decided to accept this piece of the application. I assume we're accepting this one since it's an actual site plan.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we accept this project for review.
This motion to accept it is complete. Nelson?
Second.
Offers a second for that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to accept the application for review. There's a request to waive full site plan review. What's the will of the board with respect to that? Desiree?
I make a motion to waive the full site plan review.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Nelson?
Yeah,
Seconds that. Any other discussion on waiving full site plan review? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes.
One opposed? Any abstaining? 5-1-0 with Mr. Milnes opposed. That motion carries to waive full site plan review. Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in on this part of the project? Please come forward, ma'am. Mr. Frazier, if you'll allow her the table. Oh, careful. I know that you didn't mean to do that. Please introduce yourself and sign in, and when you're ready, tell us what's on your mind. Take your time.
Yeah, it's got no, I'm sorry.
My name is Susan Ferguson. I live at 136 Wire Road, and we abut Jesse's lot. And one of my questions is, you know, I know he has his trailers there, but you know, he has the pop-up trailer there, and the garage.
Storage.
The
trailer,
store,
yeah.
right. And I thought that the property was supposed to be used for a business.
Sure, that's his intention, that he's storing his business equipment there. He's not doing business, but he's storing his equipment there, and then he takes it out onto a site.
But a pop-up trailer is considered business?
Oh, you know, a trailer, a boat, or a personal vehicle on a property like that. If I owned the building across the road here, it's your parking lot. I don't know that we would look at restricting that. Is that what you're getting at, that he would?
Well, what I'm getting at is that, you know, a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of noise over there.
Okay.
You know, we can hear the noise, you know, whatever is being pulled in, pulled out.
So you're hearing the commercial activity, the business vehicles, or
Yes.
private activity that in his
It's
residential?
probably the commercial, because, you know, we work at night and we sleep during the day.
Okay.
And this is what we are hearing.
Okay. So you're hearing vehicular traffic coming and going from the site?
A couple of weeks ago, we were hearing things being brought in.
What do you mean by things brought in? Tell me more about what that
You know,
sounds like.
whether
or-
it was commercial stuff being brought in or, you know, trucks being brought in. I mean, we're trying to sleep in the morning, and this is what we're hearing.
Okay. So trucks are driving on and off the site in the morning a couple
I
weeks
don't
ago?
know what was driving in. All I could hear is somebody say, back it up here, back it up there.
Okay, I gotcha. Thank you. Are there other comments that you'd like to offer for the board to consider?
I don't think so.
Could you actually, to give us be as clear as possible, when you define that time, what time would that be?
In the morning. In the morning.
Yeah, I was asking more specific.
Probably, you know, it could be 8, 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
And I go to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning,
Okay, I understand.
you know. You know, so it was just, you know, the noise from whether it be trucks or vehicles or whatever out there.
Okay, I understand. Are there any other members of the board who have any questions for Ms. Ferguson? Thank you so much for your testimony. I appreciate you waiting for the opportunity to weigh in. Are there any other members of the public who wish to weigh in? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Frazier, come back forward.
The noise she's referring to is when we were planting all the trees. Well, we had a tractor on site and we were planting all the trees.
Okay.
They weigh about 1,000 pounds. So
It's not very uncommon for us to have neighbors come and talk about traffic and noise and things like that. And it may not be something we directly regulate or would put a restriction on, but I do always encourage applicants to be considerate of their neighbors and respect what they're trying to do on their lot as much as they're allowing you to do what's allowed on yours. It seems that sooner or later life will bring you around to an opportunity to need their way in on something, and it pays off to have put a little credibility in the bank, put a little goodwill in the bank. So it's the end of my soapbox speech. I just want to offer that up for you, for folks to do that. So we've waived full site plan review, had a public hearing. We are at the point of either having discussion or considering final action on the application.
Just one question, what kind of trees are those, the arborvitae?
they are. It should be on your large one. They are Western red cedar.
Oh, okay.
And we have the 2 on the left side are Western red cedar, and then the 6 across the front are American white cedar.
Okay.
Those will get quite tall.
They're good-sized trees.
Expected to top out about 30 feet.
And I think also the addition of the stones will make it impossible for anybody to sort of use it as a parking lot, pull off the road.
The stones were there originally, and we encourage Merrimack PD to sit there.
That's all right. No, I can be positive about that. I still don't like the look of the thing, but I'd like your fence to be a lot taller. But that's.
On that point, I keep in mind that it's been there for quite a number of years.
Yes, I
so
know. I realize that.
It isn't new. Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the plan.
Motion to approve the plan, I guess, subject to the conditions in the memo, if there are any?
Yes, subject to Tim's conditions.
Donna's conditions. The only modification I would have would be under planning staff technical comments, item F, that it'd be similar to the home occupation, that only minor maintenance of company vehicles would be permitted.
Is there a second for Nelson's motion? Seconded by Lynn. Any other discussion? All in favor of granting the site plan approval, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0. Thank you, Mr. Frazier, for all the work
Thank you, guys.
that you've gone in to do this and to take a look at it. That brings us to discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern. And what you'll note on the agenda is that Bowers Landing of Merrimack had a meeting with us several months ago where they were going to bring us a revised sidewalk plan. They've not done so and have asked for another continuance of the opportunity to do so. I'm amenable to considering it, but I think at some point we got to.
It's not actually anything that requires any action by the board. This was I'm trying to remember exactly how this was done as part of the conditional approval. It was required that they come back at some point under consideration of other items prior to final signature. So there is no specific deadline or continuance needed on this. It's just a matter of, as long as they continue to meet the 6 months to get final approval, it would have to happen before that takes place.
And so the purpose of doing the continual continuances is to not have to do new public notices to all the abutters. As long as we don't put ourselves in a position where we hold a meeting for no other purpose than to consider taking up a continuance.
I fully expect that it'll be on the 16th of December.
Okay.
They now have all the CLD comments, and we actually just received revised plans today.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? It doesn't require any action from us since it's under discussion and possible action. Discussion items. Are there any other discussion items anyone would like to bring up? Seeing none, that takes us to the approval of the minutes of October 7th and October 21st, and we also have minutes of a site walk. So let's take up first the October 7 minutes. Does anyone have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we grant acceptance of the minutes with one minor change, which is on page 6, which I think somebody was thinking of Elvis Presley at the time, because it said Kevin Walker said they have not completely left the building. I think that's not quite what was meant. I think they have not completely abandoned. So page 6, sorry, line 17. Left the building, I think, is have not abandoned the project. would be better. I just had visions of Elvis not being in the building.
Completely left it.
The sentence would now read, Kevin Walker said they have not completely abandoned the project.
That's correct.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm happy with the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second to approve the minutes as amended by Alistair? Second by Ms. Fault. With any changes? No? Anybody else have any changes to the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes of October 7th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0 to approve those minutes. We have the minutes of October 21. What's the will of the board? Motion by Ms. Christensen to approve the minutes of October 21st as submitted. Is there a second for that? Okay.
You can still second if
Oh, okay. I'll second then. Thank you.
So second by Ms. Fault to allow us to get to the vote on the October 21st meeting. Are there any changes to the October 21st?
There's no change to the minutes, Mr. Chairman, but I think you might want to bring attention of the board to the fact that the item 4 is going to have to come back because for some reason Mr. Calica didn't get notified of that the meeting was going to take place, so that particular section is going to have to be re-
Yes, thank you for reminding me about that. It slipped my mind to bring that up earlier, that, yes, the PSNH did fail to notify Mr. Calica, who is a direct abutter of the project. Mr. Calica came into the office and did state that because of that, he wanted the public hearing to be reopened, so that will be on your agenda on December 16th.
And I seem to think Mr. Kernigan, I actually said at the time, where's Mr. Calica?
And I do know for a fact that Hut Snow from PSNH did email Mr. Calica asking if he had any concerns or comments about the project. However, Mr. Calica didn't come see us until after the meeting had taken place.
Could one make a request for that meeting when it comes back up, we actually get documentary evidence that an email was sent to him? Because I think it's going to be useful. Mr. Calica can be cantankerous. I'm trying to find a polite word. And if we had evidence that he did at least get an email.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. I'm sure Mr. Snow would gladly provide that. However, it's still
I know we're still
failing the full certified notice. It's still
got to be done.
And with that in mind, I think that we would recognize and observe that the fastest way to get from beginning to end of that is to hold the hearing, hear what Mr. Calica has to say, consider it, and decide if it changes our view of the application. And the notice is defective, so the notice is defective. With that, all in favor of approving the minutes of October 21, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0. 5-0-1. I'm sorry. Ms. Fault abstained. I was not tuned in. Now we have the minutes of the October 25th site walk of the Flatley parcel.
Mr.
Motion
Chairman,
to approve by Ms. Christensen.
She wasn't there.
You can still make a motion.
Oh, you can make a motion.
Yes. With that in mind, is there a second to approve the minutes?
I'll second.
Okay.
Second by Mr. Disco. Any discussion of these minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes of the October 25th site walk, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 2 abstaining. 4-0-2 to approve those minutes.
Should it say on the end
Ms.
that they
Fulton,
hate the
Ms.
field
Christensen.
the day after?
What's that?
That they hate the field the day after? So
Yes,
it's
they-
nice and easy to walk.
They did, and it was easier to find the flags too after they cut down all the field. But
Mowed them all down.
they did an excellent job of flagging the site with the corners of every building and the outline of every roadway and the intersections along the way of the roadway every so many feet, except for one section where we kind of struggled to find it by the water tower, but did a little good job of that. Better than I've seen for a lot of applications. With that, stop talking. Adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Sure.
Second by Ms. Christensen. All in favor of adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
6-0-0. We are adjourned.